Ever heard the expression, the best laid plans of mice and men? John Steinbeck used it for the title of one of his most famous books, and don't worry if you haven't read it, Weezer's going to cover it soon, so you'll be fine. Anyway, it was a famous expression even before Steinbeck, coined by the Scottish poet Robert Burns. Apparently back in the 1700s, good old Robbie was farming with a plow when he ran over and ruined a nest that a mouse had constructed to survive the winter. It was supposedly a pretty decent looking nest. The mouse had put some serious hours into it, but one turn of the plow blade and boom, all those plans crushed. Now, I'm not sure what Burns would have thought about the modern NBA, but I do know there's a lot of Burns going on in a lot of places. GMs, scouts, the players themselves all spend large portions of their lives trying to lay the groundwork for an NBA title run, a process that involves years of careful planning, trades, signings, and I believe very, very many whiteboards. And you cannot win a ring without all of that. You have to spend that time. Except so often, here comes the plow. This time, the man under it was Victor Oladipo. The Pacers announced this afternoon Oladipo will miss the rest of the season with a ruptured quad tendon in his right knee. This is the same injury that ended Charles Barkley's career, although Barkley was 36 and already planning to retire that year. It is, though, the same injury that felled Tony Parker last year, who worked his way back after 7 months, although it took at least a year to regain much of his athleticism. By now, I'm sure you've seen the video of what happened in Indiana last night. Oladipo in transition, trying to defend the Raptors' Pascal Siakam, and his right leg just, collapses under him. Right away, you knew it was bad. Vic was screaming as he sat under the basket. Eventually, one of the trainers covers his knee with a towel. I don't know if that was to shield him from the cameras or really to shield Victor from seeing his own knee. Tyreke Evans would later say it looked like Vic's kneecap was pushed up into his leg, and indeed, they would need a stretcher to take Oladipo off the court. Of course, because it's Victor, he took time to acknowledge the Indiana crowd. Despite being in such obvious pain, he had to wipe a tear from his eye. Within minutes, the well wishes started pouring in over social media. And then this morning, we heard from guys like Paul George, who, of course, once suffered his own horrible leg injury that rocked the state of Indiana.
I feel for him. I feel for the fans. I feel for the city, the state, for them to have to go through that again with my injury and now Vic's. It's tough. It's tough for the franchise. I think he'll come out on top through it all.
Indeed, everyone is hoping for the best for Oladipo and for the Pacers, who did at least manage to win last night despite not finishing with Vic. Indiana's actually played pretty well this season when he's been out. Still, over the long term, it's hard to see the Pacers keeping the number 3 seed that they'd worked so hard to climb to. Work that, of course, didn't just start this past October, but goes back years. The emotional parting with Paul George, the trade for Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis, the surprise renaissance of last season, the 7-game playoff series versus LeBron that was supposed to teach this young team how to next time get over the hump. All of it building to, well, now we don't know what it's going to be. The blades of that plow are sharp, and yes, as even LeBron and the Lakers are seeing here in Los Angeles, absolutely no one is immune. The best laid plans of mice and men, I guess it's time to start building a new nest. Tracy, how devastating do you think this is for Victor Oladipo at this point of his career and for the Pacers and all those plans they had?
Well, first off, prayers goes out to Vic for this devastating injury. These guys have been playing great basketball. Nate McMillan has done a phenomenal job with this group for 2 straight years now, coming into the season after a disappointing loss to the Cavaliers in the 7-game playoff series last year, and they bounced back and they have the 3 seed. Vic missed some time this year, but even with him missing time, they still managed to be playing great basketball. This is the #1 defensive team in the league. Where they go here from now, I don't know. Do you make trades? Do you make a trade to try to bring in somebody like Mike Conley, who's on the trading blocks, to kind of keep your team afloat and sustain that 3rd seed, or you just ride it out? Hopefully Vic, I don't know what his status will be for next year, but I don't know if you make that trade to bring somebody in like Mike Conley or just ride it out with what you have.
Yeah, that's a tough choice. I think long-term for Oladipo, I think thankfully it bodes pretty well, and I think Tony Parker is probably the best example. Right? He's in a lot older than Vic, and he's been able to bounce back and play at a very high level this year. This is a guy who takes his conditioning very seriously. I think he'll be back. I think for this year, it's tough for Indiana unless they make a move like Tracy's saying, to get somebody like Mike Conley. I think right now, look, they're 7-4 without him this year. But in those short-term things, it's always easier. Long-term now, people change their game plan and everything else. It's hard to see them being above the 5th seed in the East and being able to beat anybody in a playoff series without their best player.
I mean, you were in this position with Detroit. You were running the franchise, having to make these kinds of decisions. I think they've got a big decision either way. Either you think, hey, we really got something with this team. We want to bring someone high caliber in and give up some assets so we can keep this run going. Or maybe do they decide, hey, you know what? We will probably still make the playoffs this year, but we're not going to make a run the way we thought we might. There are guys on that team that are expiring contracts that are going to be free agents this summer. Does Kevin Pritchard decide, if it were you, would you say, maybe we'll get rid of a couple of those guys to get assets to make a run more focused on the next year?
Well, and I think, you know, those situations always come down to the specifics.
Right.
Like, who is it you can get as a future asset? I think right now they'll be in a situation where they'll consider everything. You know, you want somebody else wants Tyreke Evans to make a run. Maybe even somebody wants to go to the extreme of a guy like Thaddeus Young who's been starting. Will you take the, well, what am I getting back that helps me 2 years down the road?
I think you have to strongly consider trying to make a splash this year.
You do.
Because I don't see Victor coming back healthy next year.
Not at all.
No.
I feel like
I don't think not certainly not early enough or strong enough to help them make a run next year. You're 2 years down the road before you're going to have him at full strength.
That is, I mean, this is one of the most likable guys in the NBA.
No question.
You saw the outpouring around the league. It's just heartbreaking to think about.